Senator Claire Chandler, the Senate Foreign Affairs, Defense and Trade References Committee published a detailed report about human rights abuses in Iran by the Islamic Republic on the 1st of February. This report was prepared based on thousands of submissions, statements, and documents presented by witnesses during public hearing sessions to the committee. As the chair of the Senate Foreign Affairs, Defense and Trade References Committee, please let us know about this report and the recommendations of the committee to the Australian government.
This is a really important report that has been tabled today, and the recommendations in the report point towards the ability of Australia to be a world leader in holding the Iranian regime to account and not lagging behind so many of our allies across the world as we currently are. The report makes 12 key recommendations around how the government can and must, quite frankly, improve its diplomatic response to what's happening in Iran. And there are a couple of key ones that I think are really fundamentally important. Listing the IRGC as a terrorist organisation, expanding the available Magnitsky sanctions to more individuals and entities within the regime, and doing so in a more timely fashion so that we can finally come in alignment with what our international allies are doing. Looking at issues like hostage diplomacy, about countering foreign interference amongst the Iranian-Australian community over here. So it's a really important report, a really important piece of work. And I think it has been really important for the local Iranian-Australian community to have a way for their voice to be heard. We know that that community is feeling very frustrated at the government's approach so far to what's happening in Iran. And that's why this inquiry was introduced, so that we could understand what that community wanted and put a set of recommendations to government that would provide them with some guidance on what more they can be doing. So very pleased that the report's been tabled today, and it was just such an honour and a privilege to be putting it together.
According to your recommendation for designating the IRGC as a terrorist organization to the Australian government, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade said that based on the advice of the Attorney General's Department, it's not possible to list the IRGC as a terrorist organization. What's your response to this suggested advice?
Well, first of all, that's just one piece of advice that has been provided to the government. During the course of the committee inquiry, we heard a number of different views as to whether currently under legislation the tools were available to the government to list the IRGC as a terrorist organisation. But regardless of whether those views, whether those tools rather are available to the government, the IRGC is a terrorist organisation, and the government has had many months now to figure out whether it has those tools in place to list it. And if it doesn't have those tools in place, well then we as a parliament should be looking to legislate to be able to do that as soon as possible. So look, I think the recommendation still stands because it reflects on the fact that there was conjecture around this issue during the committee inquiry. But as I say, the government's had plenty of time to figure this out. I think it's time we saw some more action on this front. Well, I can completely understand those frustrations. Having been very actively engaged in this issue for some months now, I've been looking at what our allies were doing, particularly in applying Magnitsky sanctions to individuals within the Iranian regime far earlier and to a far greater list of entities and individuals than our government was. So I can understand their frustration. I certainly hope that the report that's being tabled today is taken by the government and they look at the recommendations and consider implementing them, because as I said at the start, if they do, then Australia has a real opportunity to lead the world in holding the regime to account. If not, we're going to continue lagging behind as the government has been up until this point. I will just say, in terms of the report, I really want to thank all of the individuals within the Iranian-Australian community in particular who provided submissions, who appeared at hearings for our inquiry to help us come up with the recommendations for this report. And I also recognise that those individuals have often made those submissions with, fear of serious consequences for them personally, dangerous threats and the like, for putting those views forward. So I recognise the real bravery that's been required in coming forward to the committee and providing us with their views, and I'm very, very grateful for that. Well, I think now really is the time for the Australian government to listen to the Iranian Australian community and read this report and look at the recommendations within this report and act upon those. That's why this report has been written. It was partly about giving the Iranian community a voice to be able to voice their frustrations to government. And so now the ball is absolutely in the government's court.